No deal's better than a bad deal, chanted some protesters overnight.
Our so-called leaders are negotiating away the future of our children's right at this very moment.
COP negotiations routinely go down to the wire, through it and out the other side. This year's deadline, over 24 hours ago. This afternoon, the Association of Small Island States walked out in disgust.
We came here to this COP for a fair deal. We feel that we haven't been heard, and there's a deal to be made, and we have not been consulted.
The $300 billion on the table, nothing like what island states and developing nations say they need each year to protect them from climate change. Nations like Germany support them, accusing the authoritarian petrostate Azerbaijan, the hosts, of defending the fossil fuel business, not the planet.
We will not allow the most vulnerable, especially the small island states, to be ripped off by the new fuel-rich fossil fuel emitters who have the backing, unfortunately, at this moment of the presidency.
Smaller, vulnerable states feel shut out and sold out.
There is a new figure of $300 billion that has been proposed by the developed nations. The developing world have said that that is unacceptable, and what we are requesting is $500 billion up to 2030. Our initial ask was $1.3 trillion.
And that sounds a lot, but it's easily available via developed countries.
Well, look, when we had the pandemic, we raised 20 trillion in a year. It doesn't all have to be brand new money. We spend an awful lot now. There's well over $1 trillion a year being spent on environmentally harmful subsidies, which could largely be repurposed away from subsidizing fossil fuels and subsidizing environmentally destructive agriculture and fishing, and use the same money to do good things.
But back in the talks in Azerbaijan, America's lead man insists the offer on the table is a good one.
Need is great. The offer on the table from donor countries is high. So hopefully we can pull something together.
They have late today pulled together to get an agreement on how global carbon trading will work. That took 10 years. As for the money question, well, it's around 11 at night in Baku, and they are at least still talking. Well, joining me now from those talks in Azerbaijan, the lawyer and climate campaigner Mina Rahman, who is head of programs at the Third World Network and a former chair of Friends of the Earth International. Mina Rahman, thanks very much for making the time for us. I'm going to ask you a really unfair question. Where is all this going?
Well, at this point in time, it looks like there is going to be a deal. It was really very tough. But I think the biggest pressure from the United States in particular was that the only way they could agree to a deal, and well, it's not gavelled as yet, but we think that there might be a decision. The only thing that the US can accept is a non-reference to the provision of financial resources. So what we saw with the text, which has not been gavelled yet, is references to mobilization of 1.3 trillion by all actors and 300 billion of mobilizing of resources with developed countries taking the lead.
Now, that's the key, forgive me, but that's the key figure, isn't it? The $300 billion a year. It didn't go down well earlier, did it?
No, it was almost as if, you don't have a choice. This is the only thing we can offer. And it was like wrangling in a fish market over the price of fish. So for me, it was absolutely outrageous that from what the developing countries had asked in terms of 600 billion of provision of resources from developed to developing countries, there's no reference to provision when you have the Paris Agreement very clearly say that it's the obligation, mandatory obligation of developed countries to provide finance.
But let's, this degree of detail is probably going to be a little lost on many people, but give us a sense, what could you live with? 400 billion a year. I mean, that's a lot more than was on the table a few days ago.
No, this is very hard to live with because we in civil society have been saying that no deal is better than a bad deal. And this is very much like a bad deal The reason being that we don't really know what developed countries are going to put on the table. It's about a mobilizing. How are they going to mobilize? This is the problem with that 100 billion goal that they had from 2010. And they count loans. There is no concessionality there. They count export credits. So they count everything to talk about the achievement. So this is not climate finance.
Now
Climate finance is the clear provision.
Sure. Explain to people, a lot of people in the West particularly will be thinking, well, this feels like charity. You're giving all these billions of dollars every year to developing countries. Tell us why it's investment, not charity, in your view.
Well, it's not even investment. We don't call it investment. First, it's not charity. This is a climate debt. This is about an obligation that is due to historical emissions. The developed world from 1850, since the pre-industrial era, has been emitting carbon dioxide. And today, we live in a very climate-constrained world. So in a climate-constrained world, we are supposed to do poverty eradication. We have to do finding the basic needs of people. And on top of that, we have to much more, in a faster way, transition away from fossil fuels.
Right,
now,
and very briefly, the money is there, as you see it. It sounds like a lot of money, but it's there, isn't it?
No, there's no money there. There's no money there.
No,
it's a lot of smoke and mirror.
Theoretically, it's available.
Well, theoretically, and this is the problem, the 100 billion itself was theoretical, because what Oxfam has shown before is that what has been delivered in the past was only 20 to 30 billion at least. So this is where the counting and the transparency in the counting, it's really smoke and mirror, as I call it.
Right.
So it's a big magic trick. It's like a Houdini.
Smoke and mirrors and magic tricks. But we'll have to leave it there,
yes.
Meena Raman, but the talking's clearly going to go on. Thanks very much indeed.
You're most welcome.